In a world where secrets are sharper than knives and trust is nothing more than a fragile illusion, a single moment can change everything. Hidden behind polished smiles and whispered promises lies a storm waiting to break. This story begins not with hope, but with betrayal, the kind that claws its way beneath the skin and turns love into a weapon. It is a tale of power, fear, and revenge, where every choice comes with a price and no one walks away unscathed. As the darkness tightens its grip, the line between victim and predator blurs, setting the stage for a reckoning that no one can escape. Under the pale yellow light of the cold, dim room, Leslie sat on her black leather chair, the one she always chose whenever a ruthless decision had to be made. In her hand, a small, metallic USB drive gleamed faintly, lifeless to the naked eye but containing the kind of power that could bring anyone to their knees. Every secret inside it was like a blade, sharp, merciless, and capable of slicing someone's life apart. And tonight, that blade hovered over Kat's throat. The air was suffocating, so tense that a single breath could shatter the fragile silence. Gone were the soft words between friends, gone were the warm memories of sunlit afternoons on the porch. All that remained was power and control. Leslie knew she held the upper hand. She had always been good at this, reading fear like an open book, finding the weak spots, and crushing them with surgical precision. Kat knelt on the floor, her trembling fingers digging into the edge of the rug as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Tears streamed down a face once proud and defiant, mixing with broken sobs that thickened the air. She had believed she was strong, that the scars of her past had made her untouchable. But Leslie proved otherwise. No one is untouchable when someone else holds their past in their hands. That USB held everything Kat had buried. The darkest years. The wrong choices. The secrets that, once exposed, would curse her forever. Leslie knew it, and she savored the moment, the intoxicating power of watching a proud soul being dismantled piece by piece. Leslie's gaze was as cold as a blade. She didn't need words, her presence alone was a verdict. She wanted Kat to betray Tomas, the only man who had ever made her feel loved, real. To betray him, to leave him, to become nothing but a shadow of who she used to be. Only then would Leslie feel satisfied. Kat understood. Deep within her, something darker than pain began to stir. Her lips quivered, not out of weakness but because something fierce was rising inside her, like molten lava pushing against the walls of a volcano. Leslie thought Kat would beg. She thought she would break like all the others. But Kat wasn't like the others. Behind those tear-streaked eyes lay a silent abyss where loss, sorrow, and rage were gathering into a storm. Tomas had no idea any of this was happening. Somewhere else in the city, he still believed Kat was strong and unshakable, someone he could trust. But right here, in this room, a single decision was forming that could destroy them both. Kat once believed love could save everything. Leslie shattered that belief with nothing more than a tiny USB. But Leslie's biggest mistake was not knowing that Kat had nothing left to lose. And when someone has nothing to lose, they stop being afraid. They become willing to burn the world down. The air grew thicker. The metallic clink of the USB as Leslie twirled it between her long, elegant fingers dripped with disdain. Every movement was a reminder that she was toying with someone's fate, and Kat could feel the cruelty of it like a hand squeezing her heart. Her breath hitched, her chest tightened. But beneath it all, a ruthless resolve began to harden. She would not let Leslie write the story alone. Kat's past was filthy, but it would not keep her on her knees forever. She had survived wounds deeper than this. Betrayal, manipulation, being treated like a pawn. If she had lived through those, she could live through this too. She inhaled slowly. The tears were still there, but her eyes were no longer the same. Leslie didn't notice the change, not at first. In her mind, Kat was still the obedient puppet who would soon sign her own death sentence. But Leslie had forgotten one thing: even puppets can cut their strings when they stop being afraid. Outside the window, the darkness swallowed the city whole. The room became a silent stage, with two souls facing off, one holding the strings, and the other preparing to burn them. Leslie rose and walked toward Kat, her heels echoing sharply on the wooden floor. She bent down, whispering the final words she thought would shatter Kat completely. But instead of despair, Kat lifted her head. Her gaze made Leslie falter for the briefest moment. It was no longer the gaze of a cornered victim, it was the gaze of someone ready to drag her down into the abyss. Inside Kat, the fire of vengeance burned brighter than ever. No more tears. No more trembling. Just a cold silence and a silent promise: Leslie will pay. Betrayal was no longer just pain, it was the fuel that was transforming Kat into something else. She knew she could lose Tomas, her future, everything. But if everything was already under threat, she would make sure Leslie went down with her. From that moment on, there was no clear line between good and evil. Only two women with their own darkness, their own secrets, their own scars, and an unforgiving war quietly igniting. A USB so small had become the detonator of a hidden storm. Leslie thought she had already won. But Leslie didn't know that Kat, the woman with nothing left to lose, was the most dangerous player of all. As the night devoured the city, a plan of revenge took shape in Kat's mind, cold, calculated, and merciless, just like the cruelty Leslie had sown. There were no victims anymore. Only predators willing to destroy each other. And Kat, once on her knees in tears, had now become the flame waiting to ignite the darkness. In the end, the silence that followed was not the kind of silence that brought peace, it was the kind that devoured everything, like a void swallowing the last fragments of light. Kat stood alone in the shadows, her chest rising and falling with the weight of everything she had lost and everything she had chosen to become. The storm had already passed, but its echo still clung to her like ash after a fire. She had burned everything, every bond, every illusion, every trace of the girl she once was. In the smoldering ruins of that night, there was no going back. Leslie's plan had been flawless, or so she had believed. She had played her game with calculated precision, pushing Kat to the brink, expecting to watch her break. But she had underestimated the kind of rage that blooms in a person with nothing left to protect. Kat didn't crumble. She transformed. The fear that once kept her shackled became the very weapon that set her free. She was no longer the cornered girl begging for mercy, she was the blade forged by pain. And Leslie, for the first time, saw what it meant to face the monster she herself had created. The USB, the weapon that could have shattered Kat's world, now lay abandoned and meaningless. The secrets inside no longer had power, because Kat had stopped running from them. She embraced the darkness she had spent years denying, and in doing so, she stripped Leslie of the only leverage she had ever possessed. It wasn't victory in the way heroes are written, but this was never a story about heroes. It was a story about survival, about what happens when betrayal turns love into war. As the night air crept through the cracked windows, Kat let the coldness wash over her. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't healing. It was acceptance, raw, merciless, final. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like, or if there would even be a tomorrow for her, but she knew one thing with terrifying clarity: she would never again kneel. Not to Leslie. Not to anyone. In the distance, the city continued its indifferent rhythm, unaware of the war that had just ended in silence. People walked, lights flickered, the world spun on as if nothing had happened. But for Kat, everything had changed. The chains were broken, and in their place, something far more dangerous had been born. The reckoning had left scars on every soul it touched, and the blood of choices made could never be washed away. But as she took her first step into the cold, dark night, Kat understood something that Leslie never would: real power doesn't come from holding someone's secrets, it comes from no longer being afraid of your own. The game was over. But what had awakened inside her was just beginning.